Welcome to Complete BS, the official podcast of couch coaches everywhere. Not just football. It's every sport that ruins your parlay, wrecks your fantasy week, and still brings you back for more. Buzzer beaters, blown leads, and brackets and flames. Yeah, we're all over it. Unfiltered takes, armchair analysis, and enough bold opinions to fill a playbook. Hosted by Brian Schmuck, sports junkie, the Saban of stats, and your official voice of I could coach better than that. Let's go.
Couch Coach Nation, it's that time again, and we've got a good slate of games. I'm really excited. Starting out Thursday night, UTSA is going to USF down in Tampa. Nice game for Thursday night. And then Friday, Houston's at UCF. We've got 5-3 Northwestern making the trip to Southern Cal to take on the Trojans. And Tulane and Memphis on Friday night, which is likely an elimination game for the conference championship game. So big slate of games before we even get to Saturday. The College Football Committee, they released their rankings, and while I'm not concerned about the top 10, I do think Texas, Oklahoma, and Vanderbilt are all too high and are just getting that SEC bump for losing games within the conference versus actually winning games. On that note, it's embarrassing that 6-3 Tennessee is ranked number 25 and not a single team from the group of five is ranked. It's clear that the members of the committee don't watch games outside of the SEC and the Big Ten, minus the occasional ACC or Big 12 game. Memphis, North Texas, and James Madison all should be ranked ahead of Tennessee. They got 3 losses and not a marquee win. One more note before we get to the games this weekend. Auburn, to no one's shock, they pulled the trigger and fired Hugh Freeze. That adds another SEC job opening. And where do they look? Alex Golesh and Jon Sumrall, they're up for virtually every job across the country. I think they're going to have their pick of jobs. It's just going to be a matter of where the fit is and where they feel most comfortable. I think they're going to be in the mix. Then a name to keep an eye on is Kenny Dillingham. He coached there before, and while he's at his alma mater and at his dream job, the lure of an SEC contract by way of an SEC contract buyout and generational wealth could be too much to pass up if they make an offer to Kenny. If Auburn wants a big name, I think they're going to have to go the recycled coach route. They're not going to get the likes of Eli Drinkwitz or Lane Kiffin. They got to be looking more at a Jimbo Fisher or Dan Mullen. I'd be surprised if they hire someone other than the 5 names that I just listed. AV, are you ready for the weekend?
The weekend's looking good, man. We're in November now. That means most teams have roughly 4 games left to play, which means the conference championship games are going to start to really shape up. You're going to really start to, in the next few weeks, you're going to have some big games that will decide conference championship matchups, which will ultimately also decide some playoff implications as well. So we're getting down to the end of the season in November where games matter more. Weather's colder. College football playoff committee's doing their thing to make everybody mad. It's a good time of year, man.
Absolutely. You're going to have elimination games, just like I mentioned with Tulane and Memphis. Teams that have 1 losses, they drop another game and they're out of their conference championship game. And in some cases, that eliminates them from playoff contention. So every game, super important. These results in these next couple of weeks, they're going to dictate a lot. We're going to have a much clearer picture. And let's get it going with LSU at Alabama. Traditionally, this is a big rivalry game. But LSU, they've got a new athletic director, but they don't have a football coach. They're coming in 5-3, but none of those wins are versus a P4 team. Their best win is either 5-3 Louisiana Tech or 3-5 Florida. Alabama, on the other hand, 7-1 and on a 7-game winning streak since they dropped their opener. They're ranked number 4 in the CFP rankings, and Bama's a 9.5-point favorite in the game. Alabama's averaging 410 yards a game and 34 points to LSU's anemic offense, ranked 12th in the SEC. The only offenses worse than them are Florida, who's fired their coach, Kentucky, who's likely to fire their coach, Auburn, who just fired their coach, and South Carolina, who fired their offensive coordinator, perhaps to save their head coach's job. Defense, where many thought LSU would shine, Alabama ranks ahead of them in scoring defense and total defense. AV, does LSU even have a chance in this game?
They hired Frank Wilson as the interim coach. And that sounds good because he's been a head coach before. His first 2 years as a head coach, he won 6 games each. Those next 4 years, he never had a team that won more than 4 games. He's the interim coach, so it doesn't mean a whole lot, but it tells me he's probably not going to be a good interim coach, or at least a great one. And then they promote to their new OC and play caller, Alex Atkins. Now, before Alex Atkins was the offensive coordinator, he was their run game coordinator. They averaged 3.8 yards per carry. LSU has 850 rush yards combined for the season as a team. You compare that, like Florida State has 1,900 plus, almost 2,000 at this point, same amount of games. It's just a bad offense. Now you're giving the play calling to Alex Atkins, who was in charge of part of the bad offense. I don't think it gets any better. Alabama's super efficient on offense. They convert 50% of third downs. They're top 3 in the country in red zone efficiency. They don't turn the ball over. They don't allow negative plays. I think Alabama, it's not going to be some massive blowout or statement victory, but I think they just come in very professional, take care of business, nice and tidy, 30-14 Alabama.
But I think this is one of those games that the LSU coaches are, when it's over, they're just going to put the film away and say, all right, let's just move on to next week. We're not even going to get into it. Roll Tide, 31-10. Alabama will be up early and take their foot off the gas. We've got Oregon traveling to Iowa. Oregon 7-1 and ranked 6th in both polls, with their only loss coming by 10 to Indiana. But their best win was Northwestern, who's the only team that they've beaten with a winning record. Iowa, they're 6-2, ranked 24 in the coaches poll. The Hawkeyes have losses to Iowa State by 3 and only a 5-point loss to Indiana. They do have a 38-point win over 6-3 Minnesota last week. That's their best win, but it's their only win versus a team with a winning record. Oregon's the favorite on the road at 5.5 points. Iowa leads the nation in points allowed in the second half. They only allow 4.1 points in the second half of games. If you're Oregon, you need to have a lead at halftime because you might not get anything but a field goal in the second half. Iowa, their passing attack, it's non-existent through 8 games. They only have 1,061 yards, which is 5th worst in the nation. AV, how do you see this game shaping up?
Yeah, so Oregon, you mentioned the passing game for Iowa is non-existent. They average like 130 pass yards per game, and Oregon's defense is the best versus the pass per yards per game. So I don't think Iowa's going to have a whole lot of success passing the ball. I don't think that's their identity, though, so I don't know that it matters. Gronowski can't throw, but he can run, and Iowa likes to run the ball. That could be a place where they can have some success against Oregon. And then with Iowa City not necessarily being the easiest place to play, I think they have some success running the ball. I think they slow it down, make it kind of an ugly game. But I like Oregon's playmakers, and there's enough on defense there to get some stops. I'll take Oregon 27-20-ish, something like that. I think it'll be an ugly kind of gross game.
Well, and gross might be the name of the game for this one. The forecast is supposed to be cold, windy, with a chance of rain. That could impact Oregon's ability to pass the ball. I see this being a low-scoring defensive game based on who has a short field due to turnovers or big special teams plays. Iowa, they've got your man, the best return man in the country, Caden Weegan. They're playing at home. Kinnick Stadium's a tough place to play. I've got Iowa with the upset 17-14. We got BYU and Texas Tech. I'll give you my pick later with Robbie, Bosco. AV, what do you like in this game?
I don't know where you sit in this game, but when I'm looking at it, BYU wants to run the ball, but Texas Tech has the number 1 run defense in the country. Texas Tech's front 7 is elite. You got guys like A.J. Holmes, Lee Hunter, David Bailey, Jacob Rodriguez. Jacob Rodriguez has 7 forced fumbles and 2 interceptions this year already. They only allow 74 yards per game on the ground. I just think they have better athletes, better depth. BYU kind of makes me a little nervous too when you look at the games they've won. They won by 3 to Utah, but that was at home. This one's on the road. Utah's a good win. That's fine. They won by 3 against Colorado, by 6 against Arizona. None of those teams are as talented and as good as Texas Tech. And Texas Tech lost a game, but that was without Baron Morton. Now he's back. If he can get back to early season form, I think Texas Tech runs away with this game. I think it's an easy win. So I'm going 41-17.
All All right. Well, let's get into the book club. We got AV's book club, and we're here to make some money. What do you got?
All right, I picked up a few games here. I'm gonna go Duke -9.5 at UConn. I think Duke's offense is rolling, man. Like, they put up 46 against Clemson last week. I think they'll put up 40-ish against UConn. I think they'll just score enough that even if it's a sloppy, kind of a lazy rebound game after a tough one at Clemson, I still think they can put up enough points to cover the 9.5. I think it's going to be 42-28, something like that. Next game will be, I'm taking UCF at home against Houston. I am not a believer in Houston. The win records of the 6 win is 27-34. Now, 7 of those 27 wins are against Stephen F. Austin, right? So that's probably your best win is Stephen F. Austin. You take away their 7 wins and you're 20-33. This is a collective record against the teams you've beaten. So I don't think their 6-2 record is as good as it looks. UCF is 4-1 at home this year. They beat West Virginia by 32 at home, and West Virginia just beat Houston last week. UCF might take the victory. I'll take the 1.5 points. And then I'm fading FSU against Clemson. Clemson -2.5. There were signs of life from FSU last week, but Clemson has athletes on offense, and any team with a pulse on offense seems to just move the ball at will against FSU. I like Clemson's athletes on defense to get a couple of stops, and I just can't trust FSU yet. So I'm going to take Clemson -2.5 at home. Might be an emotional hedge. Maybe they'll prove me wrong, but seems like an easy bet.
I really like the Duke pick, and I'm with you on the Clemson-Florida State. I actually think the defense is going to be awful in this game, and it's going to be a shootout, and we'll see where it goes from there. But bad defense in that game. My bonus pick, I've got Indiana -16.5 at Penn State. This is a noon game in Happy Valley. Beaver Stadium will not be a factor in this game. And Indiana, they want to keep pace with Ohio State. And Ohio State just beat Penn State last week, 38-14. So I expect Kurt Cignetti to want to make a statement that they're better by way of margin of victory against Penn State. Indiana scored over 50 5 times this year, including the last 2 weeks. Make it 6 and 3 in a row. I've got Indiana easily covering this game, 56-17. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with BYU legend and national champion Robbie Bosco. Welcome back, Couch Coach Nation. I'm excited to have BYU Cougar legend Robbie Bosco join us on Complete BS. Robbie arrived at Brigham Young University as a highly touted quarterback from Roseville High in California, where he shattered passing records and earned a scholarship to join the Cougars' vaunted QB factory, a lineage that includes legends like Jim McMahon and the massive shadow cast by Steve Young's departure following the 1983 season. As a junior in 1984, Bosco seized the starting role and orchestrated one of college football's most improbable undefeated runs. He led BYU to a perfect 13-0 record, capping it off with a heart-stopping 24-17 Holiday Bowl victory over Michigan. In that junior year, BYU's first and only national championship, he completed 283 of 458 passes for 3,875 yards and 33 touchdowns. Topping the NCAA in passing yards, he was a consensus All-American and finished 3rd in Heisman voting. In 1985, it wasn't just an encore, it was an explosion, guiding BYU to an 11-3 mark, another WAC title, and etched his name deeper in Cougar lore with 4,273 yards, second only to McMahon in school history at the time. His single-game masterpiece, a blistering 585-yard, 5-touchdown clinic against New Mexico, a BYU record that still stands today. Another All-American selection, runner-up finish in the Davey O'Brien Award, and another 3rd place in the Heisman Trophy voting. 24-3 as a starter with 66 career touchdowns, a slew of NCAA records in his rear view. The NFL beckoned in 1986 when the Green Bay Packers selected Robbie in the 3rd round. He suited up for the Packers for 2 years, but after nagging injuries sidelined him for good, he returned to Provo, where he began his life as as a coach and then an administrator. Bosco was the quarterback's coach at BYU from 1990 to 2003 and is currently serving as the director of the varsity club, fostering fundraising, alumni ties, and the next generation of Cougar champions. Robbie, it's great to have you on.
Brian, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I always like to start off with recruiting, and you were a standout high school quarterback. What was that process like for you, and were there other schools besides BYU that you considered?
Yeah, it was very interesting. In high school, I wasn't particularly interested in football, especially kind of growing up. I liked playing flag football, but once it was like putting pads on, I really didn't want a lot to do with it. So the first time I ever played tackle football was when I was a freshman in high school. And after about 2 weeks of practice, I actually quit thinking, this is not for me. I don't know if I want to do this. And then my brother was the starting quarterback as a senior there, and he kind of helped me to understand the plays and talked me kind of back into it, and all my friends were, talking me into it. So I went back and played, and then it became like where coaches were talking about you could have a scholarship, if you play quarterback. And I'm like, I didn't even know what a scholarship was at the time. So my junior year, our senior class was super good. So I thought, I'm going to stick this out and I'm going to play. So I started growing in love with football, and I always was kind of a natural thrower. So that was kind of the position that stuck with me. Recruiting was great. I wanted to go to a school that threw the football and threw it a lot. I was not a runner. I just had to throw it. And at the time, there weren't a ton of schools that threw the ball. So I narrowed it down. Even though you could take 5 trips, I narrowed it down to BYU, Cal Berkeley, and San Diego State. And the reason I love San Diego State is Doug Scoville, who used to be the quarterback coach, offensive coordinator at BYU. He was now the head coach at San Diego State. And so I remember that first time I went on a trip there, he put his arm around me. He goes, Robbie, all those All-American quarterbacks at BYU? I go, yeah. He goes, you're going to be the next one here. And so as an 18-year-old kid, I'm like, that sounds pretty good to me. But BYU was always my first love, and I'm happy I made that decision to go there.
Before the world really knew about Tal Mummy and Mike Leach, there was Lavelle Edwards. Talk to me a little bit about him as a coach and his wide-open passing game, and then a little bit about him as a man.
Yeah, it was interesting. When he became the head coach at BYU, he knew that BYU football had to do something different than all the other schools, because we were getting really good players, but not the talent that a lot of the teams had. And so he thought we need to go into the passing game. And I think when they started throwing the ball, one of the big quotes was, there's only 3 things that happen when you throw the football, and 2 of them are bad. The first couple of games weren't all that great, but I guess the great thing about Lavelle was he says, we have to stick to this, and we just have to get better at throwing the football. And so that kind of gave us an advantage, throwing the football 30, 40, 50 times a game rather than trying to be a 50-50 team. And at the time, a lot of people didn't really know how to stop the pass or understand what to do. And so we had some amazing coaches, and Lavelle, his intuitiveness just said, we're sticking to this if I get fired, but we're going to be successful. And as a person, Lavelle is one of the best human beings that you will ever meet. People got so used to him in Provo, the people that live here in Utah, they kind of took him for granted a lot of times. But I know I traveled outside a couple of times. Like one time we went down to Texas and he won the Bear Bryant Award. So I traveled down with him and everything. And, we had already won the national championship, so people knew who I was. But when we got there, he just got hounded. And I was like, hey, nobody even remembers me anymore. But so that's what, outside of the state of Utah, it was amazing the respect that he got. And he was still respected in the state of Utah, so don't get me wrong there. But he's just an unbelievable person. Very few, if any, have bad feelings about Lavelle Edwards. And if they did, they probably weren't starting or playing a lot. But other than that, he was a father figure to all of us, and we always took that to heart. He was just super fun to be around. I got to play for him, coach with him. I spoke at his funeral. We traveled a lot together, and his wife Patty they kind of go hand in hand, and just great people.
If you're watching ESPN, that late college game day wrap-up show, they'll hear the name Trevor Maddich, and they know him from ESPN, but he was your center in the '84 season. Tell me a little bit about Trevor as a teammate and a center.
Trevor was brilliant. He was super smart. I think he'd get teased a lot because he would always line up these M&M and go through the fronts and the pass play we had or running play, and he would just go down to perfection of what he had to do. I love Trevor. He was funny. I think he only missed one game that year, which was his senior year. But Trevor was a great team leader. He kind of led our offensive line, and I really liked him as a quarterback because he stood up really tall, so I could stand up there very tall and not have to crunch down too low. But great human being, and he represents the Y as much as he can over there at ESPN, and it's always good to hear his name out there.
1984 was one of the closest votes in football history in voting for the national championship. Of course, in 1984, the national champions were determined by a vote and not playoff like we have now. What are some of your memories around that time leading up to the Holiday Bowl and after the Holiday Bowl with where you guys thought you were going to end up and where you're going to be voted champions?
Well, one of the thoughts was it was us against the world, literally. You know, you always hear that, but there were a lot of people that did not want us to win it. They thought this is going to mess up college football. They're in the WAC. But for us, for a team, and Lavelle always talked every single meeting we had, don't worry about the outside noise. You guys go out. We can't control what people are saying or who people want to vote for, but we can control what we do on the football field. And we always had a chip on our shoulder. We knew that people were going against us, that people didn't want us to win and all the naysayers out there. But I think deep down, I think there were a lot of coaches that loved Lavelle Edwards, and there were a lot of people that respected him and said, hey, look, they were the only undefeated team. And we totally understand if for some reason we would have had a loss, or if there would have been another undefeated team, we probably wouldn't have got the championship. But at the time, we were the only undefeated team, and we were very proud. We knew going into the Holiday Bowl, we always felt this way, that if we could win this game, that we would be dubbed national champions. And we had a lot of good players on that team. I don't think anybody understands the talent that we had. We had two linebackers that played in the NFL for 10 plus years. We had a free safety, Kyle Morrell, that played for a long time. And I think we had 12 guys or 13 guys off those teams that made it into the NFL. And some of them had super good careers, and it was just a fun team to be around. But we were okay with the naysayers. It just gave us a little more energy to go out there and play. And the great thing is they can't take it away from us now, so it's all good.
In 1984, you were third in Heisman voting, and again in 85, the Heisman went to Doug Flutie, in 85 to Bo Jackson. What was that Heisman experience like? Did you go to New York in either or both of those years for the Heisman Trophy presentation?
Well, it was interesting because in 84, Steve Young had just graduated, and nobody even knew who I was. So even to be picked third was pretty good. We were actually playing in Hawaii, and it was at halftime when they told me, hey, you came in third for the Heisman. And so, no, I didn't get invited, and I wasn't able to represent BYU there. That would have been a great thing. And in 85, I actually went into the season as the favorite to win it. And then we had one really bad game and kind of threw me out of that loop. But I think once again, we were gone, and I didn't go either time to the Heisman. But I've seen it on TV, so it looks like it was pretty cool.
I'm sure many of our listeners know the QB lineage at BYU from Mark Wilson and Jim McMahon, Steve Young before you. Later, Coach Ty Detmer, Steve Sarkisian, among others. What makes playing quarterback at BYU so dynamic? Is it the altitude?
It might be. That ball floats nice and smooth through that high air. You know what? First of all, it's a great place to play. Right now, as you can see, Kalani is just doing a great job as a head coach at BYU. The teams are playing really good, and they're having another great year this year. But back then, I think if you were a guy that wanted to throw the football, and the quarterbacks really all weren't super highly recruited, but it's just a great place to play. And at the time when I was there, they were throwing the ball so much, is like that's where you wanted to go. You wanted to be able to throw the ball 40 or 50 times a game and show off your talents that way. But I think right now we're able to recruit the top players in the country to come play quarterback. And it's showing that winning, throwing the football, we have a very offense. Aaron Roderick does a great job as the offensive coordinator. So I think people want to play for him. People enjoy and love playing for Kalani. And I think that brings a lot of high talent to Provo, which we've had for a number of years now.
Well, it looks like Bear Bachmeier is well on his way to being that next great BYU quarterback. The Holy War is one of the best rivalries in college football, but one that I think often gets overlooked by a lot of folks east of the Mississippi. Having been a part of so many of these games as a player, a coach, and administrator, what's that game like for you? And do you still get a little bit fired up each year when the Holy War comes around?
Oh, Brian, a little fired up is not even say at all. This game is huge. It is just so big, and it's just a game that you want, that you've marked on your calendar. Whether you're a fan or a player, you know when that game's coming up, and you can throw the records out. It does not matter. We've gone in there with not great record. Utah's come in with not very good record, and it's a battle to the end. So you're playing for a lot of pride. You're playing just for your school, and it really does mean a lot to me. I remember this past game when we beat Utah. Bear played amazing. I usually don't go into the offensive staff room, but I did this time, and I gave them all a hug, and it was a great victory for us. And yeah, it's something special. People that are in these rivalry games, they're just the best, and they're super fun when you can win them.
You know, it's a great iconic color clash with the red and the blue in that game. It is one of the best rivalries in college football. Folks listening, you got to mark the Holy War next year. Tune in and watch it. It's a great football game. Being a proud Cougar alum and representing the Y, you're now serving as the director of the varsity club. In many ways, you're the connection point to a lot of former athletes to the university. Talk a little bit about that role.
Yeah, it's a super fun role. You know, part of my role mainly was to be a fundraiser, but also they put me in charge of the varsity club, which is for former athletes. And it's not just football, it's all the sports that have ever been at BYU. So I've got to know, well, through 13 years of coaching and 5 years of playing, I know just about everybody that comes around. So they're always calling me for tickets. I'm like, that's one thing I'm not in control of is tickets. And so I don't have those things. But it's super fun to even get to know the athletes from the other sports. I love to hear their stories and how they came to BYU and what makes them Cougar fans still and why do they love BYU. And I love that whole interaction with all of them. And that's been a kind of a fun part of my job. We do a tailgate a couple hours before kickoff of each of our home games, and it's a great atmosphere, and it's fun to enjoy all their success too.
Well, let's get to the big game on Saturday. BYU's going to Texas Tech. Both teams ranked in the top 10. BYU comes in a perfect 8-0. Texas Tech is 7-1. Their lone loss came to Arizona State. Both teams have very explosive offenses. For Texas Tech, they dropped their one game to Arizona State when quarterback Baron Morton was injured. The games that he's been in, they've been lighting people up. They've got the number 5 total offense, the number 4 scoring offense in the country, and they average about 100 more yards in the air than on the ground. BYU's a lot more balanced. There's only 1 yard that separates their rushing and passing totals on the season so far. To have success versus the Texas Tech front 7, they need a really productive day from LJ Martin. His ability on the ground to keep the Tech front 7 from just playing the pass and teeing off on pass rush opportunities and really trying to get after Bachmeier will be the key and opening up some play action opportunities. Texas Tech, their defense, they lead the nation as a team in sacks with 44. Individually, David Bailey also leads the nation with 11.5 sacks. Linebacker Jacob Rodriguez has 7 forced fumbles on the season. This is a really fast and aggressive defense. BYU offensive line's really going to have their hands full with this front 7, and it's going to be a major test for Bachmeier when he's under pressure, how he's able to get rid of the ball or escape out of there and try and pick up first downs with his legs. Robbie, how do you see the BYU offense and this game going?
Well, if this isn't the game of the week, I don't know what else can be. Both teams are inside the top 10. Texas Tech is one of the most talented teams that I've seen play so far this year, and they're just really amazing. I'm very impressed with what Bear has done so far. To win on the road in the Big 12 is very difficult to do, and to be a true freshman and to play how he's been playing is really incredible. I think Aaron Roderick will come up with a great scheme to help protect him a little bit because of their speed and their aggressiveness to get to the quarterback. And the one thing about Bear, though, that he's a big, solid guy, and he's not afraid to lower his head ahead and take on defenders. So it's going to be an amazing matchup. Sometimes in these kind of games where you have explosive offenses, the defenses kind of rise, and all of a sudden somebody may pick like, oh, this game could be in the 30s or 40s. Well, they also could be in the teens, because I think both defenses are very good and have made plays and have won a lot of games, for their team. So I think it always starts in the trenches. We got to be able to run the ball, and I think our O-line is going to be up for the task, and we just got to be able to play. And it's got to be a full game. We can't play decent in the first half and good in the second half, or vice versa. We got to play a solid game the whole way through, and we'll just see what happens. I think turnovers will be a big portion of who wins this game. Typically, one that doesn't turn the ball over is going to have an advantage. And then when it's time to score, whether it's kicking a field goal or scoring a touchdown, you got to get points on the board.
Texas Tech, they're a 10.5-point home favorite, and that line indicates to me the faith odds makers have in the Red Raiders defense, and Morton being 100% playing quarterback. I do think that the BYU defense is better than they're given credit for. Bachmeier's continued to improve as the season's gone along. If you look at the first 2 or 3 games of the season versus where he's been, specifically in Big 12 games, you've really seen him continue to mature and get settled into that offense. It's going to be a really close game. I do think that if it's played in the teens, that will be to the advantage of Texas Tech. I think BYU needs to score points and get into a bit of a shootout with Texas Tech. If this game is as close as I think it's going to be, I've got a little bit more faith in Kalani Sitake than I do Joey McGuire. I'm going with Sitake. BYU 31-30. The Cougars get it done on the road and stay undefeated.
Brian, I like that. I'm glad that came out of your mouth, though. But I'm not going to pick a score, but I am going with my Cougs. The Cougs have been tough. There's been some games where we've been down by a couple touchdowns, and we have found a way to win. Defense has stepped up, and they're going to have to step up again. They're going to have to play a very good game, maybe the game of the year for them on defense. But I think the Cougs can pull this out. I don't mind when the other teams are favored. It's kind of nice to go into games with a little chip on your shoulder and to try to prove. It seems like BYU in life has always had to prove themselves on the field, and this might be another game where we have to do it, and that'll help us play hard.
Absolutely. It's going to be a great game on Saturday. Robbie Bosco, thank you so much for joining us on Complete BS. One of BYU's absolute legends, part of the quarterback lineage there, both as a player and a coach. Thank you for joining us. You can follow the Complete BS pod on X, Instagram, and make sure to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks for listening to Complete BS. Be sure to subscribe, share, and follow us online. And tell us what you think of this episode. Use hashtag CouchCoachNation, and let's keep the conversation going.